Before we start the video, a large thank you to Payne G, Sanji, Mikhail, and Jacob for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And as always, an immense thank you to Halo Burner and Ryan Bellin for their immense support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is sincerely and greatly appreciated, gentlemen, and I hope you enjoy the video. Welcome back, guys. Today in this episode, we're going to set up colliders, and we're going to make sure our scenes load and unload correctly. I believe we didn't implement the logic for checking for a do not unload list, so I don't think the scenes are going to unload right now. But we're going to give it a shot and see if anything else needs to be adjusted and make sure everything works. So I'm going to go into my world right now and drag in all my scenes, and I'm basically going to just start making triggers for the collisions in the area. So first I'm going to make an empty game object. I'm just going to call this scene triggers, or you can call it world triggers, whatever you want, but this is going to be the game object that exists in our world. It's always present, and I'm going to put a bunch of other game objects as children of this object that will contain triggers that when you walk through, it will trigger a location load. So the first one I'm going to make, I'll call it dungeon underscore throne room underscore trigger, and then 01, because you might want to have multiple triggers, more on that later. But this is basically a square, so if you wanted to, you could just go and add a box collider, and you could get away with shaping it here. I like going and changing my view up here, and then kind of getting a bird's eye view it also. And then just make sure this is set to a trigger, add a box collider, turn on gizmos so you can see it, and then you could just kind of shape it this way. And obviously level design is not going to be like this a lot of the time. Probably most of the time, depending on the project you're working on, it will be more odd shaped, kind of like the cave over there to our left. But just for the sake of demonstrating what I would do if this was a perfect square, you could do something like this and then just line it up like that with the height, and then, you know, kind of trimming the edges. Make sure you can get it in as close as you can to the bounds of the actual location. You do not want the scene triggers of different locations to overlap. You don't want that. You want there to be space between them. If they're the same location, it doesn't matter, but for different locations, do not let them overlap. Then add your location trigger, your script, onto that and put in the location in the variable, and you're good to go. I called the script load location trigger, and my location is called dungeon underscore throne room. So that is basically it. Now, what if you want to shape around this thing? A square isn't going to work, especially if this is very close to other locations and they're kind of sharing boundaries. Well, go to your window package manager, go to Unity registry, and type in ProBuilder. I don't think there's a space in that. No, there's not. Type in ProBuilder and add ProBuilder here. Oh, that's funny. There's a warning even though it's Unity. And click install. And then I'm going to give that a second and wait for it to actually load. Okay, when it's loaded, you should see a tools bar up here now, and then you should see ProBuilder. Let's go to that, go to editors, and click create polyshape. So I'm just going to go to the bird's eye view first. You're going to want to do that too, trust me. And make your perspective like this. Topographic, I think it's called. So ProBuilder, editor, create polyshape, and then we're going to click to add points you can see here. So what we're going to do is just basically trace the bounds of the level on the floor or the ceiling, whichever. And I'm just going to do it kind of rough, like it doesn't matter. It does not need to be perfect because we can adjust this too. You'll see that in a moment. So I'm just going to kind of roughly go around the bounds here. And then we're going to click. There we go. Come right down here by the door. And again, I'm going to make sure that this is not overlapping the other level trigger when I'm done. So once you're done here, you can actually click on the game object or the shape again. And you'll have something like this. And you'll notice it's pretty flat right now. So what we can do is just go over to where we have the shape. You press enter or space to set height, but for me that's not working right now. So what I'm going to do is just go to the shape's game object itself, and when you highlight it, you're going to see your edit poly shape on the top. Click that. This green square will appear, and then you can drag this up or down to create the shape's height. All right, cool. So when you have that at a reasonable height, drag it up and make it roughly match the bounds of your area. That looks pretty good to me. Now what I like to do too is make sure you click convex and is trigger, otherwise this won't work. But you can see here that sometimes, a lot of the times, the actual collider, that's why it's good to have gizmos on, doesn't match the shape of the mesh render. This is because we're using convex, and this is kind of a limitation of this. But you can adjust it like this and kind of bring it in to make it fit the shape more. But sometimes you're always going to have a little bit of drag on the outside. So what do you do if that drag on the outside goes into the bounds of another area? It doesn't right here. This actually works out quite nicely. It's only a little bit outside the bounds and it doesn't affect anything. But what if it does? Well, I'll show you what I would do in a moment. But first let's make a new folder for materials. And I like to make a material for these so you can clearly see where the boundary is. And what I do is I add a material to all of these mesh renderers that I'm using to create scene triggers, and I make it translucent or transparent. and I just set it to like a nice light color so I can see basically if it's going to overlap with another scene trigger. And set this to transparent, and then just drag it on here. And this is just my workflow. I think this looks nice, and it's easy to see exactly where this is now in regards to your location. Okay, that's quite nice. You can also highlight both of your objects at the same time to see that they're not overlapping. So if I click this and then control click, I can see with the gizmos on, make sure those green lines are not overlapping. I'm going to rename this to dungeon underscore stone underscore caves trigger 01. And again, make sure that it is set to a trigger. I'm going to add my location, load location trigger script, and then set the location to stone caves. Now you can obviously disable the render before you start the game. This is only for you in your scene view to see where it is. And you can also have gizmos on again to see where it is. So that was quite nice. I'm just going to turn on the render here, and I'm going to highlight these at the same time, make sure they're not overlapping, and they're a little bit too close right now. So I'm going to make sure I separate them because you don't want those colliders to overlap. So I'm going to just back this one off just a little bit. And just that little bit of space, that's perfectly fine. There we go. Great. Okay, so what if you're making one and it overlaps with an area? And I'll show you what I mean. So I have this dirt cave section that actually extends into this little part of the dungeon. So if I do this here now and I come down here like so and I make this little shape, you're going to see when I get to the end here, up where that square is in the top left, it should cut over into the other room. So let's go here now and raise it up a bit. So I'll click on the poly shape, click edit poly shape, drag the green square up like so, and then I'm going to go into my view after and make this mesh collider convex and set it to a trigger, and also add my material. So there's the shape, looks pretty good right now. Now if I click this, yes it does. So you can see here, this corner right here is going into the main room, main hall I called it. Now we don't want that, so what would I do in this situation? Well, I would simply edit this shape down to get rid of that extrusion that goes into my other area. If it doesn't go into an area, it's no big deal, you don't need to change it, but it does, so I'm going to make sure this goes all the way down so it's not in there, and then all I would do is just add another poly shape. You can duplicate this one or create a new one, doesn't matter, or put another trigger there. Now it doesn't matter if this trigger is overlapping because it's in the same area, nothing is going to happen. But I would just make another one and put it up here in this other area. So basically this is the end result, and that looks fine. Now sometimes you're going to have this bit of extension like up here where it doesn't matter because this is not on the bounds of another area. But when it's on the bounds of another area, you want to make sure it is not overlapping. And this looks good. So I'm going to quickly do the last room, and with the magic of editing, I am back. And now we can actually test this. So you can see here, this little outside piece doesn't matter because that's not the area. That's just some background image, like cave walls. They're not actually in the playable location. So I'm going to make sure I untick all these mesh renders. Make sure you have all your colliders set to triggers. And then I'm going to go into my player manager, and I'm just going to throw a do not destroy on load. So when we go from the main menu, this guy pops up into the game world. And I'm going to save that. Now, if I go into my player prefab, I'll set a rigid body. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to trigger the on-trigger enter events. I'll make it kinematic because I don't want him falling down when he comes in the map. And now I'll start the game, and we should pop up and do the scene here. Yes, we do. Of course, I don't have my camera on my player or anything, so I'm going to go to the scene view and show you. So here is our little player. Now, when I go through this barrier up here, he should load the next part of the map. So let's see. I'm going to go to the dirt cave trigger right here. So when I pass this threshold, I got the renderer turned on here so you can see it. It should load the ice caves. So let's click on the player. I'm going to pop him up here, pretend he's climbing up the stairs. And right when we pass this threshold, boom, yes. Cool, excellent. All right, so two things happened here that weren't supposed to happen. One, scenes did not unload. They should have, but we don't have a method for that yet, which we're going to make. But more importantly, two, the thing that I did not expect, scenes are loading twice. So I'm going to take a guess and say it's because for some reason we're not adding these scenes to our loaded scenes list. So I'm going to investigate that really quick, but we'll deal with the first problem first, which is the logic that we haven't implemented yet, which is scenes are not unloading. So come over to our world scene manager, and we're going to make a function here. And the function is going to be simply to check for unrequired scenes. And this means when you enter a new area, we're going to check the area that you're currently in, and then get every scene that doesn't need to be loaded and unloaded. So at the top here, we're going to say if the world location manager is null, simply return This should not run when you're in the menu if it happens to try for some weird reason. If you're not actually in a world with locations, then don't bother to run this. And then we're going to say if we're already loading or unloading a scene, return, don't run this yet. Wait until all load and unloading sequences have completed, and then you can make the call on what needs to be there and what doesn't need to be there. Then we're going to make a list of string. We'll call it scenes to unload equals new list string. We're going to do a for loop, and we're going to iterate through our loaded scenes, which I believe is not being populated right now, but we'll get to that in a moment. And then we're going to say scenes to unload dot add loaded scenes I dot name. So basically we're taking every loaded scene we have right now and we're adding it to a list of scenes to unload, but we're going to modify that list. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to say world location manager dot instance dot generate do not unload list. And we could say based on player locations. So this doesn't exist yet. We're going to make it. What is this going to do? It's going to get a basically list of every area that has a player in it, and then every area that has a player in it, we're not going to unload the scenes needed for those areas, or locations rather. So if I'm in location 1 and you're in location 3, we're going to make sure the game does not unload the scenes that we need for each of our locations. So let's create that function now under the world location manager, and I'm going to make a comment. Specifies which scenes to not unload for the server based on where the players are in the world. And we're going to start this off by making a list of strings for do not unload scenes, and this is going to be all the scenes we want to not unload. Now we always want to never unload the world, so we add do not unload scenes world, which in my case is world scene manager dot instance dot world. Your world may differ depending on if you have multiple or not, or depending on how you have this set up, but I have one static open world. It's always going to be the same, so I just add that one. Now we're going to make a list of world locations, and we're going to call this locations with active players, and then we're going to do a for each loop. And we're going to do a for each loop, and we're going to iterate through our dictionary, which is our basically a set of world locations, and each world location has a list of players in them. Now, because this is a network game, and your friend could disconnect from you at any moment, leaving his entry in that list null, we should always check for null entries and remove them before we actually go ahead and see which scenes we don't want to unload. We do this by, within the for each loop, doing a for loop, and we're going to basically check against the pair.value.count, and we're going to say if pair.value I is equal to null, we're simply going to remove at that entry by saying pair.value.remove at, and we pass I. So basically if there's any null entries in the lists of players, we're going to find it here and we will remove them. Now after all null entries have been cleaned up, if there are any, we're going to check these locations to see if either of their lists has a count above 0 by saying if pair.value.count is greater than 0, and if our locations with active players does not contain this location already, then we're going to add it. So in short, this simply means if any location has a player count above 0, add it to the list of locations that need their scenes not to be unloaded. Then finally, we're going to do a for loop, and we're going to iterate through this final list that we have of locations. And in each of these locations, we're going to get a list here for string. We're going to say scenes required is equal to, and we're going to say locations with active players I dot get required scenes for this location. Okay, then we're going to say for loop again, and then we're going to say int j, and then we're going to take each of these scenes we got that's required for this location, and we're going to go ahead and add them to the do not unload scenes. So what this is going to do again, one time real quick, it's going to go through all these locations, get the scenes for each one, and then add them to the list above that we have called do not unload scenes. And then we can take this finalized list and we can set it in our world scene manager. We already have the variable for do not unload list, but we never actually modified or set it up. So we're going to say world scene manager.instance.do not unload scenes is equal to the do not unload scenes we just created. Okay, cool. Now we have all that done. Where do we call this? Well, first we got to go back and finish this function for check for unrequired scenes. So after we get our do not unload list, next we're going to say for each scenes to unload.count. Remember, we've added all the scenes in this so far. We're going to iterate through them all and say if do not unload scenes contains a scene from our list, so we're going to say scenes to unload I, we want to simply remove that scene. So again, really quick, we get every scene in our game, and then we add them to a list, and then we generate our do not unload list, And then we check our list, and if any scene in our list is also in the do not unload list, we remove it. Then finally, we unload every scene that's left. Now, we call this under load additive scenes coroutine when all of the load queue is complete. So if loading queue amount is less than or equal to 0, we're going to call check for unrequired scenes. Now, you can see here our loaded scenes is actually 0. We're never actually adding to the list. And this is because I put this event here in the wrong location. It should not be under load event completed. It should be under load complete. So what you want to do is copy all the logic for load event completed I had in the first video and put it under load complete. Do the same thing for unload complete too. So everything that's under unload event completed is supposed to go to unload complete. I'm not entirely sure why this is not calling correctly, because to my understanding, the load event complete is called when the scene is finished loading for all connected clients. If I am mistaken and someone in the comments knows that this is not the case, please let me know. But regardless, under load complete, this is for the connected client. I know this will work, and we go back into the game and you see that the loaded scenes list has populated. So I'm going to put a camera behind our player here, and what I'm going to do is drag him through the game, or the scene rather, pretend this is a game. I'll zoom out so you can see. But watch what happens when I cross the threshold of this area. So we're going to come down here, and when I go past this cracked wall, which is where our scene render or trigger is, you can see, boom, it starts to unload those other scenes back here because we don't need them. And then if I turn my player around here, and then I drag them back out here, you can see, boom, it loads back in. So let's just really to drive home the point, I'm going to go up these stairs, just pretend I'm running upstairs and not dragging a capsule through a game. You have to use your imagination here. And we're going to slowly go up these stairs as well. And I believe the trigger is at the top of these stairs, but what should happen is I should load the last cave sequence in the back, and I should unload that other cave sequence that's off to the side of the throne room. So I cross this threshold, and yes, exactly that happens. Very cool. So there you go. We have a way now to load and unload scenes seamlessly in our world. So in my example here, I use structure, props, and effects. But in my actual game, I have sometimes many more scenes for certain locations. For example, I have a very dense forest area, and I've split that up into foliage, stones, structures, props, effects, and lighting. I say this to say that you should play around to kind of see what your game needs. Now, on the next video, we're going to create a way to decouple our rendering from our colliders, because in a game where you are both the host and a connected client, you will always need to have the collision loaded in most games. And I'll give you an example as to why. Let's pretend we're playing an action RPG, and I'm in Area 1 and you're in Area 2, and I am the host. So if I'm the host, that usually means that all of the NPC behavior is calculated on my end, and then on your end, you receive that information. If I disable the collision in Area 2, then all of the AI will suddenly fall through the floor. But at the same time, I don't need to see the renderers in Area 2 if I'm not there. So what we can do is just basically decouple the renderers and the collision, so the collision is enabled still, and everything that needs collision gets calculated normally. But if I'm not there, I don't need to see the renders, so they're not enabled, so we're saving memory. So in the next video, we're going to learn to decouple the collision and the renders, and we're going to use some scripting to modify our inspector and create a few buttons to basically automatically get all the renderers in our scene and separate them by their own individual scenes to make this a little bit easier. And we'll make it so every time you make a change in your world, it will automatically get the new renderers and add them to the list for you as well. And lastly, I'll also go over why you might want to start with all your game objects, root objects anyway, disabled, and then I'll make a tool to enable them over time over the course of a few frames. This again is just a little bit nicer on your memory, and it helps prevent the likelihood of a stutter. Alright guys, I hope you learned something. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to my patrons for keeping my lights on. Thank you to the people who take the time to leave a like and comment on the video and share this series via word of mouth. You have my sincerest gratitude. I'll see you guys next week.